Welcome to the Simpleton Podcast, the most pump it up podcast in the whole spiritual Catholic realm.
Y'all ready for this?
Y'all ready for this? How you doing, Laura Hehman?
Good.
Right.
I'm suffering. Never
From
mind.
what, you
Secondhand
suffering?
embarrassment.
Laura is embarrassed for our money. I do believe that the heavenly host does listen to our podcast, even if they cringe. And I'm hoping today that Father Abraham would deign to listen a little bit, but I feel like he's probably the most busy of everyone in heaven. All right, we're going to cover some of Father Abraham's territory today.
Yeah.
All right.
Ryan, I think like the worst like insult you can say to somebody is like, I'm embarrassed for you, because not only are you embarrassing, but you're too embarrassing to know you should be embarrassed, you know?
I think that's great.
Yeah. Hopefully Abraham does not feel that way about our content today. So here we go.
He's embarrassed for. I think they probably are perpetually embarrassed for us. but maybe they just view us as toddlers, and therefore it's not embarrassing. It's just like, look at them fooling around down there, you know. So good. All right, this is back to the manual. All right, so let me give a 60-second where you start in the manual to today, and then we'll start fresh with the new topic. Okay. The manual starts with that the biggest problem in man is hiding from God, avoiding God. It's not God avoiding us. And it's not man discovering God, it's man stop hiding, which is the same thing as saying stop lying. Mm-hmm. So the first stage of kind of this like way of describing the spiritual life is, how do you get your own self-deception and lies out, right? And as you do that, you start getting more in the presence of the Lord, right? At some point, you have to start asking, like, how do I now proceed? Because it's not like, you know, if you're going to be Christian for 70 years, you're going to spend the whole 70 years merely stop lying, although that's worthy. You have to, at some point, start grabbing onto truth, you know? And it's kind of, in my mind, you're starting to build your house and you're choosing your foundation blocks, right? So we already did some podcasting on Scripture, Revelation, the Magisterium, reality itself, as like ways that you're going to like find your building blocks, like how you're going to discern truth to put them into building blocks, right? And today we're going to talk about Revelation and theology. And there's going to be a big warning today that not all that is true is worthy of being your building block. You know, any thoughts on that so far? How would you characterize what we've done so far?
Yeah, no, I think that was a good characterizing. And I think I would just add, it's like the more that you are getting out of self-deception, the more you can be in the presence of God. And the more you're in the presence of God, the more help you have in getting out of the self-deception, you know. Yeah. Right.
One of the ways to go about this like quest to find these like worthy building blocks of your spiritual life is to like have a guiding question, right? And this is not obvious what this question should be, because you see people, in my opinion, take up questions that aren't the best, you know, like you could just ask like, how do I get to heaven? Yeah. You know, and that gives you a certain, you know, impetus to look, you know, or you could even ask like, how do I correct myself or fix myself? You know, and then you go to Scripture with that question, right? And both of these kind of go in weird directions.
They're both good questions.
They're good questions, but they're not the first question.
I just think that both can get you off track. Yeah.
Right. Like Christianity is not about
self-help.
You know, right. It's not self-help. It's not about just making you feel okay about yourself. It's not about getting a passport ready to go to heaven. It's like more profound than that, you know? And the question that I'm going to put out there, and then we'll kind of explain the danger of having the wrong question, is the question I'm going to put out there is perhaps the best guiding question. What is the good news? Like we call it the gospel. What is it? You know? Yeah. And to not limit yourself to like a New Testament good news, but the whole darn thing. What is the good news? Like starting from Genesis, what is the good news? You know? And I think that something that Romans don't give enough, don't understand well enough all the time is like the Orthodox Church kind of emphasizes spirituality over theology, right? And they'll say things like, for every good theological idea, you get two bad ones. And they didn't say two incorrect ones. They didn't say two false ones, but it's like two that don't help you, that might actually hurt you.
Yeah.
And this is very similar to the fall in the Garden of Eden. They fell because they ate of the knowledge of good and evil. Having the knowledge of good and evil sounds great.
Yeah.
But it's a trip up also.
Yes.
Yeah. It also ruined the perfection. We'll talk about that more later. But
I interviewed yesterday a Simple House applicant. It was an interview I really enjoyed. It was great. But he said in high school, he kind of got into like reading the Bible more and understanding his faith. And his mom cautioned him against reading the Bible like a historical document or reading it, if I understood this correctly, like in a way to like gain knowledge, and cautioned him to approach it with reverence and knowing like the coming of Jesus in the New Testament was the fulfillment of this long history, And I thought that was awesome. Most parents would be like, oh, my kid's reading the Bible. Great. If you care about being a Christian, but that she understood somehow that it's a powerful tool, and it's like, sorry to compare the Bible to a chainsaw, but like a chainsaw, if working correctly, can chop off your limb,
Right. Right. It's like if someone said, hey, I'm going to go dwell and read and study the most true book in human existence. Mm-hmm. And then you realize, and that might kill you. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like that just sounds so good, but you don't understand that that's also, it's kind of like if I was to say, I'm going to go get a PhD in physics. Well, physics is true. It's good. And I might end up making nuclear weapons. Yeah. That's very bad. Yeah. I might be part of mass murder of civilians. Okay. But it's still a true endeavor, but it ended up very bad. Right. Yeah. And, let's talk about that with theology, because this is important, particularly because this is kind of the blind spot of the Roman Church a little bit. Knowing that both of us are full supporters of the Roman Church. We're not Orthodox, but you have to admit this, right? So theology is basically philosophy using revelation as axioms. So it's basically the philosophical tool set with revelation. And an example of a bad idea, like the nuclear weapons would be like, I find a lot of people spin their wheels on venial and mortal sin, as if it's their job to judge your sin as venial and mortal and to judge their own sin as venial and mortal all the time. And that's like a spiritual life sidetrack. It's not leading you to greater thankfulness. It's not leading you to greater love. It's not leading you to, even in a sense, like really become in union with God. It's something that's true that's also not helping you progress spiritually, right? And I can't say that that's never helped anyone ever, but I've known a lot of people who it's been a stumbling block for. Yeah. Kind of like Christ is the truth, Christ is the love, Christ is God, but he's also the stumbling block.
Right, yeah.
We've all probably spent some time in that like spiritual dead end.
At some moments of my life, it's been like I'm trying to overcome a particular sin, and it's been helpful to say like, okay, I'm not going to go to communion if I do this sin until I go to confession. But I, in a way, I sort of just had to decide, because at some point I was like, well, how can I even tell if something is mortal or venial? And it's like, I somehow can't,
Well, I actually don't think it's been given to us to know. Like, I think like if you read the catechism, it's all about grave matter. It's not about actually knowing. They give some, principles, which are all theologically true, right. But it's really not, we weren't built as people to be judging that. Yeah. Like that wasn't a grace God gave us to judge each other's and even our own sins.
And even our own. Yeah.
Yeah. But once again, by even saying the problem, we fell down the hole. Yeah. So let me put a different spin on this. So Dostoevsky is an Orthodox thinker. And this kind of really famous parable he wrote, which is part of a greater book called, it's called The Story of the Grand Inquisitor. It's something a lot of people are familiar with, but maybe not everyone. So the idea is that in the Spanish Inquisition, in that era, the second coming of Christ happens in Dostoevsky's story. And Christ is walking down the street and the people feel free with him and they are inspired to love. And the little kids are playing in front of him and rejoicing that Christ is here. And then the cardinal comes down the street and sees Christ and he knows exactly who Christ is. The cardinal recognizes the second coming, but then he orders his men to jail Christ, right? And then the next part of the story is the cardinal going to the jail cell that has Christ in it, right? And he opens the door and he goes to Christ and he says, when you came, you gave an impossible thing to man. And I think if we were to try to say what that impossible thing is, it's to deeply love beyond measure. It's to be thankful beyond measure. It's to rebirth yourself in the love and thankfulness of Christ, which will annihilate sin almost as a consequence. You know, it's both a cause, but more a consequence. You know, he goes, that's inhuman. That's like too much to ask of a man. So we, meaning the church, meaning the inquisitor, says, what we've been doing is making this manageable for people. And we've been doing it through theology, and we've been doing it through the sacraments, and we've been doing it through like creating this superstructure over the gospel that makes it an achievable project for a mortal, right? And in a way, I think that's true. And that's also the danger. And the way the parable ends is when the inquisitor comes into the cell, he left the door open. He just stood in front of an open door. And Christ does not tell the inquisitor he's wrong. He doesn't tell the inquisitor to stop all this superstructure building that he's been up to. He goes and kisses the inquisitor and walks out that door. And the church is simultaneously that which makes Christ available to every generation. And in a sense, always allows that dynamite of Christ to be proclaimed from the pulpit, to be available to man, to give them the sacraments to strengthen them. It also is that which tries to hide that with this like weird holiness project of like a superstructure.
Yeah. It's both an aid, right? And it's less than, yeah.
But it's almost like we're too afraid of the good news, right?
Well, it's like the church is not the good news, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And like, for an example, what I see a lot of is like, there are people who have profoundly met Christ, who have like, there's no question in their mind that God is real. They're not struggling with a question of faith like that. But then they get completely sidelined by the devil. It's like the devil is not going to win their soul, but he's going to make them useless. And an example of this is like scrupulosity. Like I'll get some missionary who like, you know, really gets it, knows God, like when they hear something true, they know it. You know, they have this relationship with the Lord that's very real, but then they get so scrupulous, they can no longer do any good for anyone else. And they live in this little hell, you know? And when you meet this person, you feel very bad for them. And you don't feel like they have like lost salvation through scrupulosity or something like this. But you do feel like this is really pathetic. You know, like somehow they're being made pathetic by this devil, you know? And the tools the devil uses for that are often theological.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
Yeah.
So I feel like this is the thing that's never clear to Catholics, but I wonder how our audience is taking this message, you know? But anyway, that's the message. Given all this that we've said about the danger of knowledge itself, not that it's bad. I mean, Christ is the truth. We need the truth. But there's a danger there. And so we have to kind of like start our quest with like, how do we sort the useful from the unuseful, you know, or the useful from the thing that could be a dead end, you know, spiritually. And I think the question, what is the good news, is a great way to start that.
Yeah.
I'm open to other questions. I'm open to other ideas there, but the best one I've ever found is, what is the good news?
Yeah, this is part of our missionary training, and it's like something we ask like seminarians when they come to think about, and a lot of them have not always like thought about that or have really an answer for you
right.
of what is the good news. And it's like, as a missionary, you know, and we're all called to be missionaries, right? But, you know, we have people that are purposefully coming to be missionaries, and they're going out and asking people to turn their life upside down, to give up, the little vices that make them comfortable or the big vices or, it's like a big ask. And it's a really strange ask if you don't know why or like what this thing has done for you or is doing for you, so.
Yeah, a common attitude, even among seminarians, is just like, I know truth, let me share it with you. And it's kind of almost like a Thomistic style, and which is fine because it's all true, but it's not the core. It's not like, I've always thought in mathematics and in computer science, they have this idea called the kernel. It's the most essential core. So the kernel of the computer is like the deepest thing in there. And all this other programming language means nothing if you haven't programmed the kernel. And the kernel is that which like compiles it and can do all, it's the machine language almost, right? It's at the core of the computer. And the unique kernel of Christianity is this like God relationship message. It's not all this other theology. It's literally the God relationship message. Yeah. So by asking what is the good news is one, you're asking a good question to help yourself progress. You're also asking the evangelical question, and that's why we call it the gospel, the good news. All right. Should we actually attempt at what is the good news?
Yes.
Okay. Given that we settled on the question, what is the good news? We actually started reflecting. And this is kind of the next part of the manual. It is revealed that there's an all-powerful, all-good God who created everything out of nothing through Christ, right? This is revelation. It's a revelation that the Jews, for the most part, understood. They may have not known through Christ, but they knew the rest of that. All-powerful, all-good God. So right there is some scary and interesting good news. I like saying it almost, one of the ways to understand the good news is by imagining you didn't believe it and seeing what a disaster that would be. So the first piece of good news is if God's all powerful and complete and all good, he doesn't need you. You are not needed. You are in fact wanted.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Like you'd much rather your family.
Well, it's hard to, the first half is hard to choke down. You're not needed.
Right.
Yeah.
You are, I don't know what, but it's like, would you rather be needed by your family or wanted by your family?
Yeah.
And if you're needed, there's this implication in that. You can really screw things up.
Yeah.
You can fail your need. You know what I mean? Like they need you to do X and then you don't. And now you're really in trouble. It's like your sin actually like destroyed something, this because they needed you to do this and you didn't because you sinned, So if you're not needed, you can't fail.
Yeah.
That's weird. You can't fail the need.
When I was younger and struggled a little more with being scrupulous, like I had this like fear of like letting down the cosmic order, which God had designed.
Right. Yeah. You see people who believe they've screwed up their lives so badly because they failed at doing what they were supposed to at some level, like that screwed up the world, And if you rephrase this, it's like when you feel that you're a failure, when you feel that no one wants you, the truth is you can't really fail. And in fact, you are wanted and you cannot mess anything up beyond repair. God can snap his fingers and repair everything. He's the manufacturer. You know what I mean? Like he's like, if he made you from nothing, he can remake you also, there's nothing you can do to yourself that makes you beyond the repair of God. Right. So this is like good news. You see people who don't believe it. It's very tragic when they don't believe it. Now let's talk about this want. So this want is this desire. Like God is complete and yet he has desire. And that somehow, I heard one person put it this way. I think they stole this idea, but if it's true, it's not really stealing. It's just proclaiming the truth. But it was like, it's the Holy Trinity that is so overflowing with love that it's out of that like overflowing, bubbling over that creation comes, and God has no desire and no want for you that is less than love.
Mm-hmm.
Like love is the greatest desire, the most pure, beautiful desire. And that's what created you, and that's what you're coming from. So
there's no pragmatic or like he didn't create us for our utility.
Right. Well, that would be like a need, right? And this love that created us, that he has for us, is not the imperfect love of a person. It's far better, infinitely better in a way. Mm-hmm. It's a perfect love, right? So you're offered from the very beginning. It's not even an offer. It just is straight up there. Nothing less than the greatest love. So now you're not needed. You're wanted. Your want is actually from love, from the very greatest love ever. And that's where you're at. That's pretty good.
All right.
Like we could, if that was the whole of Revelation, it wouldn't solve any of our problems really. Well, it would solve a lot of our problems, but I really think that's super profound. And we aren't even out of like the first book or two of Genesis.
Yeah. I think a big spiritual trip up that a lot of people have is like achievement and success, right? And here we are saying, God, that's not.
Yeah. You have some baseline achievement and success that predates your existence. And that achievement is just given all this love,
Yeah. But it's nothing that you did. It was just given to you. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
From before you started to work on it.
Yeah. And that I think
from before you knew it.
If you kind of like feel like a loser, that's like a really nice message, but it's a horrible message if you feel like a winner.
Huh.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people feel like winners. I feel like the whole thing is like you struggle to be the winner, you get on top, and then you're like, okay, that didn't work. What's my next mountain? So.
But if you pride yourself in your
right,
work success or whatever.
And if we're at that stage, we got to go back in the manual to we're all full of lies and self-deception. We got to get out of those false achievements, Mm-hmm. There's this other issue, though, that like love can be very distant in a way that this love that should not be. For example, like a priest, Monsignor Pope, used to say, God loves you, but more interestingly, he likes you.
Yeah.
And God likes you is a weirder statement that's somehow more powerful. I don't know why God loves you is like kind of emptied of power sometimes. But like, that's weird. Like he likes us.
Well, I think because we think like love is a little bit of a burden and it's like, well, I have to love you because I'm a woman of God, but, and I'm going to give you some tough love and I'm going to, martyr myself for you and I'm going to do all this stuff for you, but you're a pain in the ass to be around,
Right. Yeah. Which is distortion of the idea of love in some way. Mm-hmm. But what we also know from this is, in that Genesis account, that we're all created in the image and likeness of God. All right. So there was this big debate in the Desert Fathers about whether or not the likeness of God meant that God had humanoid form, mm-hmm. which in a way he does because Jesus is humanoid form, mm-hmm. Or I might have said a heresy. Jesus is human, which also means he has humanoid form. So don't get me on that. But the way the kind of early church resolved this is the way we're in the likeness of God is almost like a spiritual likeness, right? And what that means is God is actually a person like you are a person. And you can, in a sense, have personalism with God, right? Mm-hmm. What does that mean as far as like a good news idea? It's like God's relatable because he made you relatable to him. That like the way you kind of get things and get joy in things, he can too. And you can get him and he can get you. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. this love is personal.
Yeah.
Kind of like the love of a man and a woman. You know what I mean? It's like you're discovering each other and you're also rejoicing in each other. But it's like a personal love, not a like, I am your parent, and although you drive me nuts, I still love you, love. which is like some dreadful love, you know?
Yeah, it's reciprocal, and you can grow in the relationship, and you can grow. I mean, the person can grow in that love, you know, and as a person, when you're trying to like love another person, there's a little bit of a mystery, you know, because that person is other, of how to best love them, you know, but you can kind of imagine from your own personal experience, you know, how you want to be loved and how others need to be, you know, should be loved. And so we share that with God.
Right.
It's the same, you know. Yeah.
And this isn't really in Genesis, but let me just say this out loud. I think it's a little bit like you actually can grow so much in personal relationship with the Lord and he as a person that you can actually like get him. I mean, imperfectly.
Well,
of
like,
course.
yeah. Like
God has like a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the mind of God seems to have like a poetic justice angle to it. And just like the more you grow in relationship with God, the more you're going to see him working, not working in the sense of like, okay, the tulips came up in spring. That's God working. But he's also working in this weird, interesting, poetic way with man.
Yeah.
You know, and you can appreciate that in yourself. Like when he gets you or like by get you, I mean like kind of like tricks you a little bit, or we
told this a few years ago. Ryan and I went to Italy for our friend's ordination, who might be listening, and we were like listening to these like Italian learning language things, and the kids were like, "Why are we all listening to this? Why do we all have to listen to this?" And we told the kids, like, well, we're going to Italy, you know, for like 8 days. And when we come back, we might have forgotten English. So you guys really need to learn this.
I think the kids didn't go to Italy, right? It was just
No, they didn't go to Italy. We told them,
so that's a good question.
They were going to stay at home, you know, and we were going to go to Italy. And then we're saying we might forget, you know, how to speak English. So you guys need to learn Italian. And they were so disturbed and upset, and maybe someone cried, you know? and we told our priest friend on the trip, we told him this, and he was like, "Guys, that's like messed up."
Yeah, right.
You know, like he
sadistic parenting.
We were kind of like jerks, but then he's like later on, like a couple months later or whatever, he said, "I used that story in a homily because I just kept thinking about it." And I was like, isn't God like that? His experience of God had been kind of this loving, poking, fun, you know, and
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So we can have a deep mutual understanding with God. Well, he can have a complete understanding of us, and we can have at least a sympathy with him because he is a person, you know?
I think we can have this kind of reflection about like, what does it mean to be human, and what are humans like? And I think they can like help us understand God. And it's like you observe that humans like to create things, humans like to mend things, like, and there are these things that it's like, yes, and God is like the creator and the mender, you know, we're sort of participating in these qualities. I'm trying to point out also, like, not only does our humanity like help us understand how to be in relationship with God, but it can also like help us understand like some of God's qualities also.
Right. It's like by us discovering more about romantic love, you know, JP2 and other people pointed out that we actually discover more about God. Like by us being interacting with humans in a way, we actually learn more about the Lord also. You know,
yeah, like in the case of like romantic love should be like reciprocal, and there should be a full self-giving that is mutual, and all these things, like they tell us something about God as well.
And there's a giving and a receiving, etc. But I think all of this is coming out of we're in the image and likeness of God. Like if we weren't created in the likeness of God and God was not a person, then you could imagine a situation where we're just doing our little animal things over here, and he's not relatable in that way, but he is relatable in that way, and it's from the very beginning, you know, which is great news. It means a great relationship's open to you. Like he's giving you the very highest quality love, and you can actually get it, you know. Let's go to the next thing. So another thing in this is that man and you, let's say you, are not an afterthought. You are special and central. In a sense, you are the crowning piece of creation. In this way, you're the center of the created universe, and no matter how far and how many billions of stars and galaxies are out there, the center of the universe is actually you, and in a way it's like, well, is it me or is it humanity? And it's actually, yes, it's like, I think of it as like, a circle has one center, but an ellipse has two. And we're in this like unthinkable mathematical problem of having something with many, many centers, and as some people like start doubting the importance of man by the immensity of the universe, the reverse is true also, that all of that was created because of you being so important. The vast scale of everything just for you.
Yeah.
So you're not an afterthought. You're special and central. You're not collateral damage. Like when we say American GIs, from World War II, GI stands for general issue. So it was like an insult the soldiers gave to themselves, because they'd always be given like a canteen that was general issue. So when they called themselves GIs, they were calling themselves like expendable and like, whatever, right? Yeah. And this is not true of man. Yeah. You are not general issue. You are, whoever you are, and that this is the most special, this is a crowning achievement of God. You are.
Yeah. I mean, this is probably true for several decades, but a type of environmentalist would treat, man as the great scourge of the earth, Right. And anytime I encounter a person like this, I'm just like, but what do you think of yourself? And why, and some of those people choose not to have children, but I'm like, well, what does it mean to have a child if you think that, and I think it's like a little mind bug that gets in there quietly, Right.
It's somehow like subtly in education sometimes, It's this romantic idea of nature. And this kind of goes into the next point, though, which is interesting. So you're at the center of creation, and creation is for you, which, a stupid person might then think you can then go abuse that creation. But it's also true, Genesis good news, that God wants creation also. God created that because of his desire also, and he has no desire besides love. So it's like both you're the center creation and you're given the creation and you're the caretaker of it, because he wants it too. So there is this like environmentalism, even if man is the center point.
Yeah.
It's not that everything is now just the grist for man to grind up, for his own little desires,
Right.
He's a caretaker of it.
Yeah.
And we also find that we enjoy it more when we view ourselves as custodians and caretakers and gardeners of it. And we don't enjoy it as much when we just try to smoke it.
Pillage the earth.
Right. Somehow that just doesn't lead to greater happiness.
This idea of like God wanting nature is like, oh, like if there is somebody that you love and respect and that they value and prize something, it's like you're going to be really careful with it.
Right.
And it's easy to forget that all of creation is valued and prized by God,
Right. A little bit on loan in a way, given, but also, to be kept for the next generation also, and when he creates us at the center, he didn't put the bird at the center or the alligator at the center or the great white shark at the center. He put man at the center. And there's this distinction between the man who's created in the image and likeness of God and the beast, right? So this is good news also. You are in fact not a beast. And you see that, I think you're a person, not a beast. And you see this like confused all the time. Like people think of themselves as like merely something that evolved that has these like sexual needs or other desires that need fulfilled, and if that's true, then it's also true that you could be subjugated to someone else's desired wish fulfillment. You see people give themselves into these relationships with their fellow man as if they were a beast, as if they were to be exploited, as if they were almost like as something to be used as a means to an end, which isn't a great way to treat beasts either. But when people don't realize that they're not just a beast, things are really dark. So I think that was the last one we'll get to today, but think of this as both like something that you need to deeply dwell on. Like, you're not a beast, you're a person, you can relate with the Lord and things like this because you're in the image and likeness of the Lord, right? But also think of these as incredible evangelical tools, right? You know someone in your life who thinks they're a beast. You know someone in your life who does not think they can deeply relate with the Lord, in a personal relationship. We all know someone who doesn't think they're special and central to creation.
Or worthy of love.
Or worthy of love, right? Or they think that they were needed and not, they think they're so needed that they can screw things up so bad that's unfixable. So these are real basic, I don't know what you call them. It's like these pieces of good news have to become your paradigm. But they're also like the paradigm that we're sharing to the dude underneath the bridge, but also to the rich man. You know what I mean? And they're almost more dangerous to the rich man than they are to the dude underneath the bridge. And that's kind of the problem. Dude underneath the bridge is, man, if he gets his head right, his life gets a lot better. With the rich man, if he gets his head right, you don't know what he's going to do. You know what I mean? And giving away wealth is a lot harder than it sounds. Not just because you have to part with it, but when you see all the different projects people have undertaken while giving away their wealth, there's a lot that end in folly, charity requires a great deal of study. I got some study questions for the audience.
Great.
All right. So we have not gotten to the fall. So we've already discussed the fall in the manual some, but we're going to discuss the fall in a whole new way as like good news, right? So like dwell on that and dwell on like maybe how the consequences of the fall are not pure punishments, but are actually the way out. You can also ask yourself the dangerous question of why was Mary not born to Eve? Why wasn't the solution to the fall immediately enacted?
Granted, or enacted,
Right, which is the same thing as why did God want to have salvation history? Right, because he could have made history very short, but he made it very long. Right, and how is ultimately the fall solved, for a Christian? The last question I have is, I remember the day this question hit me. I was actually sitting with a Dominican and I had to ask it to him out loud. He was like an older Dominican. And I go, is the perfection of Adam and Eve the same as the perfection in heaven? Dwell on that. And this was a pretty short episode, guys. I think we're only at, probably after editing, we're at 40 minutes or something like that. So you can listen to it twice if you want to. Anyway, all right. I don't have anything else. Oh, we've been talking about bringing back recommendations, not for today, but I mean in the future. I wouldn't mind getting feedback on that, but I kind of want to save up all our recommendations to just do a whole show of recommendations.
A whole show of recommendations.
Well, my idea is I like it when people like Simca Fisher, man, if we could get her on the podcast. Anybody know Simca? Ask her to be on our podcast. But Simca would do these like Christmas wish lists.
Yeah.
And I found those like great. You know what I mean? Like her recommendations on Christmas gifts.
Yeah, but they were like kind of like useful items, not weird, like Russian gulag cooking sword.
Oh, no, those are good Christmas gifts. I think for the man in your life, he does need a meat axe from the Soviet Union. But and I'm totally planning on recommending kerosene. I've got a lot of reasons for that.
Recommendation, which you said was lame, so
you do make a lot of lame recommendations.
I know, and they're good.
Comb my hair in front of my camera, but it's all reversed, and so it's very difficult. All right. Please consider sending new missionaries to Simple House. We need new missionaries, and we also need new monthly donors. So consider that. You can do it through the website. Your monthly donation is matched 100% for an entire year, and it will help us serve people better. So God bless, and I will talk to you later, Laura.
See you later, Clark.
Ben was always the perfect missionary.
Yes.